Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are going to be attempting to talk about every single apparent leak, widely believed theory, and supposed credible rumor for the now widely reported July Nintendo Direct that apparently, supposedly, will be airing in just a few short days before the month is up. Yes, take this all with a grain of salt, but we are going to be attempting to talk about over 30 plus games that could possibly show up in this show. Now, I don't think everything is going to show up, but I do think a variety of these things could definitely be there. There's a lot of things that could be in this show. It's an exciting time, and there are so many people that are saying the Direct is going to be happening in July. The list continues to grow. Just yesterday, Christopher Dring, the editor-in-chief and co-founder of the game business, said, "Sounds like next week's Nintendo Direct is going to be a chunky one." And then Tentalk, friend of the channel, actually said this back in June. Per my sources, June Nintendo Direct unlikely, July is the month, third-party blowout. And what's interesting about this, now, a month later, a variety of other sources are saying that there's going to be a huge emphasis on a lot of third-party games. And so these are two more people adding to the list of public sources on there being a Direct in July. John Harker, Attack the Backlog, Nash Weedle, Nate the Hate, Video Games Chronicle, and Wood from Beat 'em Ups. So many have been reporting on a Nintendo Direct to be happening in July, the very last week. So we'll see if it actually happens, but if it is actually happening, there is a lot of games that could be showing up here, both third party and first party, and so we're going to be attempting to cover it all. But if I miss something, please, I encourage you to let me know in the comments below. Let me tell you about this sleep mask from Manta Sleep, the sponsor for today's video. If you find yourself in need of a little bit of extra rest or an afternoon nap, then this sleep mask might be a great fit for you. When I tried it out, I was actually surprised at how soft and comfortable it is, and when you put it upon your face, it does its job. It blocks out all light and it puts you in a position to sleep quite easily, undisturbed. And I also found that the back strap was highly adjustable and not abrasive in any way. It was all very comfortable and soft to put on. So if you're looking to improve your sleep, check out the Manta Sleep mask in the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. So let's start off with some pretty crazy news. Apparently, PlayStation, Sony is going to be porting over a lot of games to Xbox and Nintendo. So here we see in this job listing here, reporting to the Vice President, Commercial Management as Senior Director of Multi-Platform and Account Management, you will play a critical leadership role in shaping and executing the global commercial strategy for PlayStation Studio software titles across all digital platforms beyond PlayStation hardware, including Steam, Epic Games, Xbox, Nintendo, and mobile. This role is accountable for optimizing title profitability, ensuring cross-functional alignment, and leading a high-performing team focused on multi-platform expansion, mid-range commercial planning, and platform partner management. So basically, Sony is hiring for a role that is going to facilitate more PlayStation games going to other platforms, including Nintendo. Now, not too long ago, we got the LEGO version of Horizon, and that may have been just a little bit of a test. I wouldn't be surprised if some older Sony games come to the Nintendo Switch too, like some pretty high-profile PlayStation 4 games that have already made their way over to PC, like maybe Horizon Zero Dawn, the original release. Could that be something that's announced in an upcoming Nintendo Direct? Possibly, not guaranteed, but this is pretty big news that we are actually seeing actual evidence that Sony is going to be porting games over to not just Xbox, but also Nintendo. Now, another game that might show up in the Nintendo Direct is a new version of Plants vs. Zombies. There was this apparent rating for Plants vs. Zombies here, Reloaded, but here we see in this article from D-Labs magazine written by Bilbo Kuhn, who is known to be an insider or at least has a history of reporting on some leaks in the past. They are saying that this game will officially be called Plants vs. Zombies Replanted. It's slated to be coming out October 23 of 2025, and an official announcement should be happening within a month. What's going to be happening within a month? Well, apparently within a week, the next big Nintendo Direct, so maybe a game like this could be showing up there. But I will note, it has not been reported that this is specifically coming to Switch 2, just Switch, so there's some flexibility there, but the Switch 2 can play Switch 1 games, so odds are you still will be able to play this on your Switch 2 even if there's only a Switch 1 version, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of enhancement for Switch 2, even if we have to wait a little bit longer for that version of the game. Now, recently we've heard that Xbox will reportedly be announcing more game ports for other platforms soon, including Nintendo Switch 2. Now, Xbox has already been putting games over to other platforms. Last year, they had this initiative to bring over 4 games to other platforms: Grounded, Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush, and Sea of Thieves. All those games made it over to PlayStation, but only half of them made it over to Nintendo Switch. The prevailing thought was that Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush were too demanding to have proper versions on Switch 1, but Switch 2 might be possible. And so actually, the official Sea of Thieves account has said "oh banana" just a few days ago, and clearly this is a reference to Donkey Kong Bonanza has just come out. Many people think that this is a subtle tease that Sea of Thieves will be coming over to Nintendo Switch 2 and possibly may be announced in the upcoming July Nintendo Direct. And what's increasingly interesting about this seems to be adding more credibility to leaker Nash Weedle. This was back on April 5th of 2025. He said that Rare will be announcing Sea of Thieves on Nintendo Switch 2 this year. And now we have this fairly obvious tease that Sea of Thieves will be coming over to Nintendo fairly soon. So it seems to be offering up more credibility to Nash Weedle, who's been getting a lot of things correct this year. Now, some people want to doubt him because recently he talked about how he heard from many sources that there would be a July Nintendo Direct, but he did excitedly post a tweet where he said this week, and then shortly afterwards, he talked about how he had conflicting information, some sources saying earlier in the month, some sources saying in the last week of the month. Yet Nash Weedle's gotten so many other things correct, so I still think it's absolutely worth talking about. And he's also saying that eventually we should also be seeing Psychonauts 2, Doom the Dark Ages, Indiana Jones, Ninja Gaiden 4, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, Call of Duty, and Age of Empires. So it's a variety of other third-party games from Xbox. Keep that in mind, Microsoft has a huge umbrella of different game developers working for them now. All these games are apparently in the works for Switch 2. It makes sense that we would eventually see the next Black Ops game that was just announced. Microsoft and Nintendo are in a legally binding agreement to bring over at least Call of Duty to future Nintendo platforms for the next 10 years or so, so we would assume something like that would likely show up, although maybe they're not quite ready to put out the most recent Black Ops. Still, it makes sense to think that there are going to be some other Xbox games coming to Nintendo. We saw Xbox games on Nintendo Switch 1. Switch 2 seems even more compatible, so it definitely seems pretty reasonable, regardless of what rumors or leaks are suggesting. If you've managed to get this far into the video though, I would like to point out I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my content and you haven't subscribed yet, your subscription would be appreciated. Now, another game that some people may be asking about is Hi-Fi Rush, and there's no rumors or leaks suggesting that Hi-Fi Rush will be coming. Now, Hi-Fi Rush used to be owned by Microsoft, but Microsoft got rid of Tango Gameworks. But the publisher Krafton, the same publisher behind PUBG, has purchased Tango Gameworks, the makers of Hi-Fi Rush, and so they might decide to bring over Hi-Fi Rush over to Switch 2. It makes sense to think that it's a likely possibility. Could it show up in this Direct? We'll see. Another game that may show up in this upcoming Direct is Red Dead Redemption 2. According to Nate the Hate, another known industry insider, he's saying that Red Dead Redemption 2 should be coming to modern platforms, which will include Switch 2. Now, another game that people have been waiting to see come to Switch 2 is Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. This game was actually rated for Nintendo Switch 2, so that seems to bode well for the game being announced relatively soon for the console. One particular game that I'm actually very excited to see announced, if it's actually going to be happening, is Crimson Desert. GameStop actually had Crimson Desert listed for Switch 2 on their own website, and to me this game looks like a realistic looking version of Tears of the Kingdom, mixed in with a few other games like Dragon's Dogma, so I have my fingers crossed that this game is announced for Switch 2 fairly soon, because I would love to play it on this console. Another game that's widely expected to come to Switch 2 is Assassin's Creed Shadows. It's been rated for Switch 2, so that seems to bode well, and Ubisoft has suggested that this game is still going to be coming to other platforms, and they haven't named that platform, but the obvious big one is Nintendo Switch 2. Another interesting game that has been leaked is from Arc System Works. There was this massive data breach at Arc System Works where we heard about a variety of games coming down the road. One of them was his Project Life game, which has since been confirmed to be Dear Me I Was, an exclusive Switch 2 title coming out this summer. But another is a game under the codename Wadati, and it's using the Unreal Engine 5.4. It's supposedly coming out in November. People think it might be some other kind of fighting game that Arc System Works is known for, some real bangers there, and it's supposed to be coming to Switch 2, like that's what it's meant for. So this could be actually a pretty hype, very exciting exclusive that Nintendo is saving as a big reveal for the July Direct. Now this one's more of a theory, but Lies of P is speculated to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2 because the development team was rewarded with a whole bunch of Switch 2s. Why would they be giving Switch 2s to everyone working on Lies of P? Maybe because they plan to bring the game over to the console fairly soon. Makes sense to me. Another game that a lot of people would like to see come to Nintendo Switch 2 is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. A lot of people think this game could win Game of the Year. It's likely to be nominated across many award shows. It's a fantastic game from what I've heard. I haven't played it yet, but if it comes to Switch 2, I might. And when speaking to the Studio Sandful CEO, he has said, yeah, it's definitely something that could be interesting in regards to this game coming to Switch 2. So they haven't outruled the possibility. So there's definitely plenty of room for optimism here that the game could be announced for Switch 2 and perhaps in the not so distant future because they have received a great deal of success, which may grant them a little bit more of an opportunity, more budget, to do other projects such as porting the game over to Switch 2 to further expand on their profit margins. Now another game that people are wondering about is a Beast of Reincarnation. This is a game that's being developed by Game Freak. Game Freak normally makes Pokemon games. They don't have to work for Nintendo, they just usually do. And this game has not been announced for the Nintendo Switch 2. However, this game was announced during Summer Games Fest. A variety of third-party games were announced or talked about during Summer Games Fest, but no official announcements were made for Nintendo Switch 2, the new hot system on the market that a lot of third-party companies seem to be very interested in putting their games on there. Many people think that a lot of third parties have been kind of kept quiet because Nintendo's waiting to have a huge announcement of a whole bunch of third-party games in a Nintendo Direct later in the summer, which we're all assuming, based off all these different sources and the need for news really soon, is going to be happening hopefully next week, and that might include Beast of Reincarnation. That might explain why this game is not coming to Nintendo Switch 2. Of course, there's also a possibility that because Nintendo Switch 2 only just came out, Beast of Reincarnation is too far into development to pivot over to also having a Switch 2 version, at least initially. Perhaps later down the road, they'll port the game over. And so far, we've been talking about a variety of third-party rumors, leaks, and widely believed theories for games that could come to Switch 2. But here we're doing a little bit of a crossover as we transition over to first-party things. Because we got a rumor coming from Wood from Beat 'em Ups on his secondary channel, the Nintendo Podcast. And he said he heard that there would be a July Nintendo Direct before many other sources were talking about. There were a few, but not many. And he heard that Metaphor ReFantazio, a GameCube Shadow Drop of at least Pokemon Colosseum, maybe more, a Director's Cut of Death Stranding, a Switch 2 edition of Witcher 3, we'd be getting the release of Metroid Prime 4, and also a teaser for the next Animal Crossing game for Switch 2 in 2026. So just considering all the third-party games, there's a lot of possibilities of big third-party games that could be showing up in this Nintendo Direct. And I do not think everything we've mentioned in this video, or even 75% of everything we've mentioned in this video, will show up in the presentation. Maybe closer to half. And I'm not saying that everything we've talked about won't eventually come to Switch 2, but I think something's got to be saved for a later Direct, which supposedly there will be another Direct later this year. Speaking from a historical perspective, that does make sense, and even then, early next year is also a possibility. Games are going to continue to come to Switch 2, and with so many games out there, different companies are going to want to wait until the right time to have their games released on the platform. But in terms of first-party stuff, Nintendo games, we're hearing about Animal Crossing possibly, a GameCube Shadow Drop of Pokemon Colosseum, a release date for Metroid Prime 4, that makes sense. I'm not going to talk too much about the games we already know about like Hyrule Warriors, Kirby Air Riders, Splatoon Raiders. I'm assuming all the games that have already been announced will see some sort of update on them in the next Direct. But what about other things that have not been announced yet? Well, we've recently heard that Camelot Software is in the late stages of development on some sort of project because right now they're in the stage of apparently regional localization and automated UI testing and UI annotation. So Camelot's been working on something. What might it be? We're all hoping it's a new Golden Sun because it's been so many years. It's a fantastic RPG series with so much personality and some really cool Zelda-like elements as well. But Camelot Software most of the time just puts out a Mario Sports title. That's probably a safe expectation, but you never know. Coming back to Nash Weedle, he's also talked about some different first-party things, not necessarily for the next Nintendo Direct, but he's heard that there may be a Switch 2 edition of Pikmin 4, as well as a new Yoshi game under the codename of Sunny. I assume this would be a 2D side-scroller, but we're not sure. With Mario's 40th anniversary around the corner, the Mario movie having a heavy emphasis on Yoshi, because that was what we saw teased at the end of the prior Mario movie, it does make sense to think that a Yoshi game could be around the corner, and may possibly be announced in the next Direct, although Nintendo may wait later into the year to announce different games relating to Mario's 40th anniversary. We're not sure. But another game that might be related to Mario's 40th anniversary that makes a lot of sense to show up fairly soon is Luigi's Mansion 4, and some people have argued, myself included, that Nash Weedle may have been teasing Luigi's Mansion 4 could be on the way, because here he says that Luigi's Mansion 4 on Switch 2 is going to be crazy. Now, it's not him saying that he's heard Luigi's Mansion 4 is on the way, that's not him saying that it's going to be the next Nintendo Direct, but some people think he may have been teasing that, and when you think about it, as we've been arguing throughout this year, Luigi's Mansion 4 makes sense to be coming very soon. Next Level Games is the developer of the Luigi's Mansion series. Luigi's Mansion 3 was the most successful game they've ever made, and every 3 years, over the last few generations, they've consistently come out with a game. Their last game was Mario Strikers in 2022. It makes sense to think that they're pretty much close to ready to putting out their next game, especially when we look at their recent job hirings. They started hiring more recently, suggesting that they're transitioning over to their next project, which may mean that they're almost done with their current project, which could be Luigi's Mansion 4, in time for Mario's 40th anniversary, and also putting out a major release, a follow-up to their most successful game early on into Switch 2's life cycle. But we'll see what happens. Now, many people are hoping to see the next 3D Mario, and I do believe the next 3D Mario is absolutely in development by Nintendo. Yes, we now know that the same EPD group behind Mario has been working on Donkey Kong Bonanza, but that doesn't mean they can't be working on more than one project at once, and we have heard that supposedly it's made by younger talent from that studio. And considering who we've seen is actually working on the game, it does make sense to think that Nintendo still has talent working on the next 3D Mario, and considering the history of things, a mainline Mario game is always made available within the first 2 holidays of any console launch, so I definitely think 3D Mario is on the way. But because of Donkey Kong Bonanza, I think it does at least make sense to think that it's probably not coming out this year. However, we have heard Mario Galaxy 2 may be getting remastered and could be announced fairly soon, we presume for Mario's 40th anniversary, which might make sense to announce now in a July Nintendo Direct, so there's enough time so it can actually release during Mario's 40th anniversary this September. This rumor is coming from Special Nick, someone who works from the Xbox Era podcast, who's known to be an industry insider. He actually said this to Nintendo Prime during one of his live streams. Nate reached out to him personally, and Special Nick did clarify it was not a joke, it's a legitimate thing he heard. So, fingers crossed, Nintendo will be giving us Mario Galaxy 2 Remastered during this year. Now, another Mario-related thing that may be happening in the Direct is a news on DLC for Mario Kart World. We've been speculating that Mario Kart World will be getting DLC. It makes sense, it's a huge game. DLC usually comes to huge games from Nintendo, and Mario Kart has so much potential for expansion, the same way they expanded on Mario Kart 8 for so many years between the Wii U and Switch eras. But we've seen some evidence to support this theory, because apparently there are 2 voice actors in Mario Kart World that line up with the credits in Donkey Kong Bonanza. I won't be showing who they are because of spoilers, but just further fuel the theories that there's going to be Donkey Kong DLC for Mario Kart World. We've noticed that both DK and Pauline only have one alternate costume in Mario Kart World, and who are the 2 starring characters for the next big game immediately after Mario Kart World? Donkey Kong and Pauline in Donkey Kong Bonanza. Coincidence? I think not. So yeah, I feel pretty confident in saying that we're going to get some kind of Donkey Kong DLC in Mario Kart World. Now, we're all expecting to get a big update on Metroid Prime 4 during the Direct, but what about Metroid Primes 2 and 3 that have been rumored for so many years? A lot of people have given up on these games showing up at all, but I think the reason we haven't seen them yet is because, well, Nintendo hasn't been that close to releasing Prime 4. Like, yes, it's coming out this year, but we've yet to receive a release date. Well, after this Direct, it is expected that we will see a release date. We've seen multiple ratings for Metroid Prime 4. They've continually said it's coming out in this year of 2025 for over a year already. It's been a big part of Switch 2 marketing, and given the fact that they haven't delayed it yet, it seems very unlikely that they will be delaying it, and it's definitely going to be coming out this year. And so with that in mind, the marketing may really kick up for Metroid Prime 4 really soon, and that may include a release of Metroid Prime 2 and 3 finally. And I do think this idea is supported somewhat because we did hear that the Metroid Prime 1 through 3 visual retrospective was actually delayed to October 28th of 2025, perhaps having to do with the fact that Metroid Prime 4 is taking a little bit longer to come out this year, and may also tie into when we do see Metroid Primes 2 and 3. So perhaps these games come out in October, Prime 4 comes out in November, something along these lines, give or take a month or so. This may be when we see Metroid Primes 2, 3, and 4. Of course, if Prime 4 comes out in September, I'd be happy with that too. Now, another wildcard possibility is the next Monolith Soft title. So we've heard about 8 different codename leaks from this leaker Midori, who's no longer doing leaks, but of these 8 different codename leaks of Nintendo projects, 3 of which have already been confirmed already in Super Mario Party Jamboree, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition. The 2 others aren't quite confirmed, but seem extremely likely to also be true in Donkey Kong Bonanza and Splatoon Raiders. Project Silver Star suggesting some sort of Odyssey project not having to do with Mario, which makes sense when we take a look at Bonanza, and then Project Spiral, which seems to make sense with Splatoon Raiders taking place in the Spiralite Islands. Another of the codenames, SP Red, supposedly has to do with 3D Mario. That makes sense. Another has to do with some sort of follow-up to Switch Sports. Might be Dragon Drive, we're not sure yet, or it could be something else. And then the final one is Project Legacy, which is supposedly being made by Monolith Soft, which lines up with job hirings we've seen from Monolith Soft all throughout the Switch era. They recently took down these hirings for a new IP last year, and they're now hiring for a new RPG project, which is interesting because not too long ago they concluded the Klaus trilogy of the Xenoblade games. And so we may be in a position right now where Xenoblade will be taking a little bit of a break. They're probably still working on it, which may have to do with that new RPG project, but their next big game may be this codename Legacy game that they've been supposedly hiring for and working on throughout the entire Switch era, and could possibly show up in this Nintendo Direct. Now, I'm not super confident it'll show up in this Direct presentation because Monolith Soft did just put out Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. They usually just put out one project per year, but given that they've supposedly been working on this project throughout the entire Switch era, perhaps not too different from what we've heard of Donkey Kong Bonanza and Mario Kart World, how these games were in development early into the Switch era as well, this game might be pretty close to being actually ready and could be announced in this Direct, maybe coming out this year, or at least announced this year to come out sometime next year. So I do think it's a wildcard possibility, and within the next year or so, I think it's very likely that it will be announced. And with all of that, I still have one more thing to talk about. And that is the long-rumored Ocarina of Time remake. I've been theorizing this for quite a while. There is a couple rumors out there to support the idea that this game is in the works. There is no rumor or leak out there suggesting that it will be in this specific Nintendo Direct. However, given that this is the beginning of the Switch 2 era, it does make sense to think that Nintendo is going to announce some pretty big deal projects early on, so we have something to be excited about to get people invested into the console early on. And Zelda has oftentimes been used as an exciting announcement even though it may be a ways off. We recently talked about how this Ocarina of Time remake, which I do believe is real, we'll actually see, right, it's not confirmed, if and when it comes, would either be late next year for the 40th anniversary, or perhaps later into 2027. And so if I'm correct about that, there really is no need to announce it now, but you never know, Nintendo may want to announce an exciting Zelda project early on to get fans excited. So it's another one of those wild card possibilities. And that pretty much sums up every rumor, leak, or theory about what might show up in the July Nintendo Direct. I guess I didn't really talk about the supposed Pikmin spin-off, but with that now mentioned, that might just be it. Of course, there could even be things in the Direct that have not been discussed in this show, like maybe Star Fox, for example. I'd love to see that. But is there anything I missed? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. Don't forget to check out that Manta Sleep mask using my code SLEEPRESTART with the link in the description below, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.